ready.
Yay. Well, hello, everyone who's on the call today. This is our first broker chat for May. I'm Deborah Blue. I'm the managing broker in the Midtown office, and I'm co-hosting with Tom Fulkerson. And this is Broker Chat. We have this meeting twice a month where you can come in and ask your broker questions, or we may have some things that we're seeing quite a bit that we may discuss. But we will start off by letting you open your mic and ask questions about what's going on out there on the sidewalk and what issues you may be having and how we can help you with that. You know, when you go to a class and the class is for something specific, but you want to raise your hand and ask a lot of questions and give your details, that's what this is. So don't be shy, raise your hand or unmute, and let's help you write great contracts. So is there anyone who would like to start? Or are any of the other brokers on the call that want to talk about something that's happening quite a bit out there? Okay, I'll start then. So we're in a multiple offer situation still. I'm starting to see a little, just a slight slowdown of that. And I don't know if anyone else is, jump in if you are, but how are you handling your multiple offers? What kind of special steps are you writing? What kind of frustrations are you running into? Do you feel like you're writing a strong enough contract to be able to win that bid? What are you seeing out there? We have all the pros on the call today.
Well, I can say that I'm working mostly with buyers, and unless I can get them into a homeward program that gives them cash offers, they're unable to compete with the 30, 40, 50 offers. I'm yet to put in an offer for a home that has less than 10 other offers on the table. All of them are always over listing, of course, but there are stipulations that almost become irresponsible to me as an agent, you know, waiving appraisals and doing things that might not put my client at an advantage. So there's this notion of, yes, you want your client to win, but at what cost? And will it feel like winning anymore?
Great statement. When I'm talking to buyers, I always say, or sellers for that matter, because sometimes a seller is a buyer. But one of the things that I usually say to them is, I don't want to put my sign in, you know, I want to be proud of putting the sign in the yard when you call me back to sell it. And if we have not engaged our buyers and let them know you may be overpaying. I mean, it's not even a maybe, people are overpaying. This market will correct itself. And you never know when there's an emergency or a job change or a lifestyle change that they have to sell that house, and they're not going to be real happy when they find out, oh, I don't get to get the extra 50,000 I bid and another 50,000 when I'm ready to sell. That's one thing. Let me ask you a question. Are you competing with listings that are on MLS when you're making these offers? In other words, the offers that you've been making, are they from properties that have been on FMLS?
These are all properties that have been on the FMLS. These are all properties within that range of 190 to 250. I think that's a sweet spot where everybody's bidding.
Exactly.
Most of them are cash offers, which, you know, are almost impossible to compete with. But what I've been doing is just a little market research of my own with all these listing agents. Not everybody, I'd say maybe I get 15% response rate. from every offer that gets declined. I immediately reach out and say, hey, you know, what were the rising stars in terms of offers, and what could this offer have done differently? Just any insight, please. You know, after you've made 15 offers for a buyer, they get discouraged. And I was just looking for insight from other colleagues. And one, it's almost impossible to get a response. And two, most of them just say that, you know, the highest and best wins, and the cash offers finish first. There's no rhyme or reason. It's very black and white. You either have the extra money to put in or you don't.
So here's my suggestion for you and anyone else who is on the call about this same frustration. And this is what I've been advising the agents in my office that have the same struggles that you're having with that. Our job is to find properties. Our job is to help sell properties, list properties. And obviously you've not been able to win a bid in certain neighborhoods that your buyer likes. And we all learned in Real Estate 101, if one house goes on the market, there's 2 or 3 in the neighborhood thinking about it. So if you're finding that the buyer really loves the area, they love the neighborhood, I would go on FMLS and Georgia MLS and find those sweet spot neighborhoods and start prospecting, whether it's door knocking, mailing, because you have the golden goose, also known as a buyer. And by going into the neighborhood, someone may be thinking about selling, but they're not quite sure, is it the right time, so on and so forth. We all know the drill. It's time to mine for listings, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I mean, at this point, it makes sense to find a listing before it goes on the FMLS, because that's the only way I could get a deal.
Yes, I've suggested this. I've done this myself personally, and I've suggested it especially to my agents in the office that are working with VA and FHA, because we know that's really low man on totem pole. It shouldn't be, but it is, because as you've already said, cash is winning, you know, over ask, all these option money, all these different fancy tricks that we're all creating now for this market that we've never really ever had to use.
Hey,
I
Deborah,
would
can
also say that
interject
there's
one thing?
I don't know who was talking. Go ahead, finish.
I'm sorry, that was Tom.
Oh, okay. Janice, finish what you were saying, and then Tom, jump in.
This is actually Nancy talking. But what I would say is that there's a number of disposable income that some buyers have that others don't. So I'm talking about conventional, approved for maybe 225, consistently offering the max that they can offer, and really not having more than a $10,000 leeway outside of, you know, what he's financed for to buy. And what I'm finding is it doesn't matter. I mean, either he's going to pay over what he's financed for, or he's just gonna fall back for a moment, and unless we can get a deal that is not on the FMLS, because he can't compete with an extra 5,000 that someone else might be financed for, or might have the disposable cash to, you know, put into the game. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Tom, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to go a different direction with this conversation, if I may. I think that, and I believe, Deborah, you just attended a class with Seth Weissman. I think that one thing we all need to start being cognizant of as people are overpaying, dropping due diligence, dropping appraisal, is that we need to cover ourselves with some kind of documentation that they understand that, you know, basically what the consequences are. I know that Carlson from the in-town office and I had a conversation about this about a week or so ago, where one of their buyers decided to put in zero due diligence and then decided they wanted to terminate and get their earnest money back. And now they're starting to, they want to sue everybody. So this is not really addressing what Nancy is talking about, but I do think that we need to start covering ourselves with folks that are overpaying, not having appraisals, not having due diligence, and just think about that as we move forward.
And
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I did attend, Seth Wiseman, for those of you that are maybe newer to the industry, is one of the counsel that assist agents when they're being sued, or if brokers, developers, those type of people come to Wiseman for that. And he and Ned Blumenthal are also the co-authors of what's called the Red Book, not the MREA Red Book, but the Red Book for contracts, as well as counsel to help author our GAR forms. And anytime I can take his class, I do. And this latest class that he has out is strictly special steps. And I did share that with all of the brokers. So at some point, you guys will probably hear about it in your meeting or a handout or something of that nature. A different special steps to address what Tom just said, to cover your what. But, going back to what Nancy was saying, I think it has come to the point, and it's difficult for some agents, because if they don't know their scripts, or they have a little bit of hesitancy of rejection, you've got to get over it. You've got to get over it if you want your buyer to win a bid. And I like the path of least resistance. I mean, why am I going to go after listings that there's 30 and 40 offers on it and agents won't return your call, when I can knock on the door and find out, 123 Main Street was asking about that house next door, and they were thinking about it, but they wanted to see what that one was going to close for. And you're calling saying, hey, I've got somebody ready to, pull the trigger. Let me see it and bring my buyer and work from there. Is there anyone on this Zoom call today that has tried that's been successful?
I want to say something, that am I off of mute? Yeah, this is Janice Walker. I had one over in Dunwoody just recently, and when I got to the listing, the agent said that there was 10 offers on a house that was $750. And that was a red flag. I was like, oh, forget it, guys. As we looked at it, they liked it a lot, but it wasn't worth it. I mean, it was a great house. It was beautiful and they loved it. But at the end of the day, she said there was a lot of people that had cash offers for that, but that was a red flag to me. My clients could afford it. They had the money to pay. They asked me if they went over what, and I told them maybe 5%, but I wouldn't do it if I were them. That was just my honest opinion. I've sold them several houses before, but I said I wouldn't do it because, see, at the end of the day, they come back to you as their agent and tell you and blame you for anything. There were some things that I thought the repairs look good on the outside, but you can't see behind the walls and under the floor and what's going on. So be careful. That listing agent works for the seller, not for your buyer. So be careful of that. You can always knock on doors, and that's what I started to do. I'm prospecting in that area, knocking on doors, putting flyers, putting door hangers on the doors, and finding a house for my client. So be careful. No deal is worth at the end if you're not making your client happy, or you worry about a year later or them coming back suing you and your brokerage. It's not worth it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you said, Janice, about they come back to you, that is true, that they're going to come for the deeper pockets first. And, and really, they're not suing you. They're suing Keller, they're suing Keller Williams.
Right.
And one of the things that Seth gave us in that class was a special step to cover our whats, that if the buyer says, I want to offer over ask, I want to put 0 for due diligence, so on and so forth, that you are getting something in writing, whether it's a form you create or your office creates, or you put it on their buyer's brokerage agreement, all of those things, because the conversation needs to be had. We can't just say, I wouldn't do it, because I wouldn't do it won't cut it either.
No.
Because a year later, they could come back and say, well, when I had the money and I could have done that and I would have been fine with it, but my agent said I shouldn't do it. We need to be very clear why we're saying this is not a good idea.
That's exactly.
This is what I do for a living. We're on the sidewalk every day. Markets change, and you may not get that return, especially if it needs work. Now you've paid $50,000 over. then you put another 20 or 30 in it, and then the market balances out or goes in a different direction, and now they can't get that money out. So thank you for sharing that. But we do need to make sure we're putting something in writing, as Tom said.
That's exactly right. We have to put in writing, and I've learned from the best because Deborah Blue is my broker. Thank you.
Anyone else with some questions or situations that they want to bring to the table that they're running into? Or any of the other brokers online? I see Kim is here.
One thing I was going to say is I am seeing a lot of contracts terminate. And I think what's happening is buyers are so rushed, and if they have a 6-day due diligence, they may be trying to get things like appraisals done within that 6 days. We just had one recently where, of course, it didn't appraise because they offered $50,000 over what the list price was, and now the seller won't come down, and so it's terminating. And so I think backup offers are not necessarily a waste of time in this market. I'm seeing a lot of things terminate and a lot of backups actually going through. So that might be something you want to consider if you lose out on the initial offer, is going ahead and making sure you can get a backup in.
Will you do me a favor and go into more detail about backup? Because that's a question. I always suggest that. But can you go ahead and talk to the agents on the call?
Sure. Yeah.
Properly do a backup?
So like when you have, most of the time in this market, you have multiple offers and the seller's going to pick one to work with. So in that instance, if you have an offer that your buyer still wants that house, you can say, hey, would you like to try to submit your offer as a backup? And what that means is you basically have your purchase and sale agreement and you attach what's called the backup contingency exhibit. And so basically, if the first one falls through, the seller will then send your client notice making your offer primary. And at that point, your offer becomes the main one. So you're just in a backup position. If that first one falls through, yours then gets put in first place. So
and the backup offer is something that I have been doing very often because I've been trying to find a win. The problem is even when you submit a backup offer, the seller has to sign it and agree to it. And agents are not engaging. The listing agent is not engaging. They're not acknowledging them. They're not giving them to sellers. They're just ignoring the fact that there's any sort of exchange happening. If agents were working together like they did maybe a year ago, I think there would be a lot of progression going on versus regression. I feel like we're regressing and it's like all rules are off the table. Yeah, it definitely feels like the Wild Wild West.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's unfortunate because I think when we're representing sellers, having a backup in hand as a seller helps the first offer too. You know what I mean? So it makes
it's surprising. It's a win-win for everybody.
It's a win-win for everybody. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I guess that, the market, everything's in such demand. They're like, well, we'll just throw it back on the market and it doesn't really matter if we have a backup or not. So
is there a way to rein in some agents to say, hey, we're better together than apart? I mean, isn't there any sort of like rule book that says, hey, you might not call back today, but call back.
Yeah,
you might not text today, but text back.
Yeah, Nancy, it's called Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice.
Well, what happened to it? What happened to it?
Well, here's the other suggestion. There is the form. It's a new form for 2021 that basically also says that the seller has to acknowledge, or not the seller, the listing agent has to acknowledge that they presented any and all offers to the seller. So if you submit a backup offer, I think, and you're not getting any kind of response, and I don't know, Nancy, if that's what you're talking about, but at least you can say, okay, hey, listing agent, I'm just going to go ahead and send you this form because my client just wants confirmation that this has indeed been submitted to the seller. Would you mind signing it? I forget the name of that form. Deborah, do you know? Or
It's
Tom.
something about consent. I know what it looks like, but I don't know the new name yet.
Yeah,
It's
it's
something consent.
But that
Yeah.
it was developed for 2021 just for exactly what you're talking about, because, you know, agents were concerned that their offers weren't getting presented.
And that is real.
Nancy,
Well,
I'll
it's-
also share with you that when, and my broker colleagues might not like this, but it's the reality. When you have done all that you can to get a response, then it's a broker to broker issue. And you call your broker to say, I've sent this form, I can't seem to get it signed. And then we give a little nudge to the other broker. What comes into play sometimes when the broker is the actual agent of a mom and pop as well, those are, you know, in my opinion, the worst to get response from. But if it's a major franchise and you're having some difficulty, of course, try everything before you bring the broker into it. I always stress, do everything possible before you bring the broker. Brokers don't talk to agents, brokers talk to brokers. Do we break that
Understood.
rule sometimes? That is true. But that is what we're here for, that if you run into that, then you've done everything for your buyer. And I want to flip gears for those of you that are listing agents on here. Please hear what the buyer agents are saying. It is your responsibility to present all. It doesn't say some. It doesn't say the ones that come in on Monday. It doesn't say the ones that come in that are, you know, half done or whatever. All offers, good, bad, or ugly, must be presented. And then the best thing to do is just send a blanket email to everyone to say, you weren't selected, one has been selected, and we have a backup, or we have two. That takes 2 seconds to do. And, you know, I know we're all busy, but if you're doing one transaction or 2 transactions, you're not too busy to pick up the phone or send an email. That's just my 2 cents. Somebody was
Hey
saying
guys,
something.
it's Kim. I'd love to throw something in if I could. An experience that I had the last week, actually 2 cool experiences that I think this entire team can learn from. The first one being with an all cash offer. And just for those on the line that don't know, I do the West Cobb, Cartersville, Rome. And then I see Justin Childress on here. Hey bud, our awesome new Calhoun office. So welcome. So with an all cash offer, we all know that when you check that, read the very top line, it says with or without the ability to take a mortgage. So when you read that, sometimes it says without the ability to take a mortgage. That means all cash coming your way. Here's proof of funds, done. And then they can check the box, the ability to take a mortgage. And as a listing specialist as well, I've seen that offer come in. For the first time in my personal new market in this career, I did receive one. It was an all cash offer, significantly higher than anything else on the table. And they did check the box, the ability to obtain a mortgage. I also received proof of funds. The house, let's just call it 425. Proof of funds was 1.7 million. So I had no reason to assume that they would take on a note of any kind. Yet it was set to close on April 30th. And then on the 26th of April, and not subject to appraisal. So cash, all cash, no appraisal. I don't know, 3 or 5 days of right to request repairs. So clean, 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 clean. And 20 grand above anything else. So on paper, it looked incredible. We did accept it and we did take a backup. So smart, smart, smart. Yet on the 26th, which I believe was a Monday, we received a request for an appraisal. And I kind of scratched my head. No communication from the agent. It happens to everyone. Code of ethics, professionalism, please at least let me know what you're doing. No response of any kind, just an appraisal request. So I reached to the agent 4 times, not 1, 2, 3, 4. Text, call, text, email, you know, whatever, almost drove to her house. What was going on, and no response whatsoever. They just want an appraisal. They have the right to it. I said, I understand they have the right to it. She had no idea they were seeking funding. She's their agent and had no idea they were seeking a loan. And so I reached to the loan officer. I track that down. That's just the area of extra effort that we're in right now for our clients. I tracked down the loan officer and she said, oh no, we'll close it by the end of May. None of that's okay. We're closing Friday. So it is wild, wild west. The good news is they were allowed inside of that to take a partial note. I mean, they did take a mortgage. So I think what they're doing is taking their proceed, their fund, and they're spreading it out over several different properties. And we were able to close it, but I had to put my foot down pretty strongly that you only have a 1 8-day unilateral that you can even try to use because we have another one in place. Now they didn't know the next one in place was 20 grand less. So I did see that, so pay attention for listing agents and certainly our buyer representatives when you're sending over all cash, that you do check the proper box with or without the ability to take a note. So that was a really cool learning opportunity for me. That was number one. Does anybody have questions on that? And then I have a quick number two.
I do. So
Yes.
when they say with the ability to take a note, that is a side note. They may midstream try to get a mortgage.
They did this one in the bottom of the ninth with 2 out.
Okay. So that is indicating to you that that all cash offer might have a hiccup when they check that box.
And correct. And it wouldn't have been a hiccup had I known just, I mean, it was, we set the offer, I mean, the close date 5 weeks out, and they came in literally with 4.5 days left and said, oh, by the way. But I think, again, that's the communication lacking on the other side and poor behavior. So we as Keller Williams, we just overcome that with grace and professionalism and just stand in and go ahead and do our job. So interestingly enough, it did close on Friday. And interestingly enough, the buyer on the other side was furious with his agent because he said the balls were dropped left, right, and the other. So maybe gleefully, I've picked up an additional client by keeping my mouth shut and doing the right thing. There you go.
Congratulations. That's a great story.
And then there's just one more that I wanted to share. And just because it was a learning tool for me, a lot of people, we're in a pandemic, or we're coming off the curve of a pandemic, thank God. Many companies and business owners did receive PPP money, and we understand that. And I get it. What I experienced this last, week, so it was, there was only a full moon, not only in the sky, but in real estate. One of my clients did have some PPP money, and it needs to be documented very, very well, and promissory notes and things. I'm learning what this documentation is, and I don't understand it all. Yet she owns a small business, did receive PPP money, and was buying a townhome for her son to live in. And what we found inside the loan process is that PPP money, if they didn't have the documentation that it is already forgiven, then it's considered a debt. And in the absence of a promissory note and a couple of other words they threw around, they have to take and use 5% of that total loan balance as a monthly expense. So if somebody got $100,000 in PPP money, instantly their debt to income is $5,000 different. Student loans, sometimes in the absence of a payment schedule, they'll do 1% of the loan amount for a student loan. For our buyer specialists, when you're out there and they own a small business or they have received PPP, I think we now owe ourselves that conversation, and the lender does too, to make sure, because the good news is we caught it very early, but we were on a 14-day finance contingency, which was pretty gifting long, considering it was partially underwritten. We found out on probably day 8 that this was going to be an issue. So the PPP loan outstanding is considered a debt unless you have documentation that it's been forgiven, and the lender has to assume a 5% of that total loan amount against their income. It worked. There was a lot of smooth sailing swan on the water and a lot of paddling beneath the ground. So just pay attention with our buyers. And that's it. Anybody have a question on that? 2 great things I learned last week.
No, but thanks for that's good advice to look out for.
I'll be quiet now. Roll on.
Tom, do you have anything?
Not anything in particular. I'll go to forums if I may. I see this happening a lot. And it is when your closing attorney is on the contract to hold the earnest money, people are not filling out both forms. They're filling out one form. And it's a constant reminder that if a closing attorney is holding earnest money, not only do you need the form F511, which is their that they are actually the holder, you also need the F510, which is the agreement to be the holder. And I see that a lot. And I just want to make it real clear that if a closing attorney is holding earnest money, which I have my own opinion about that, make sure that you are getting both of those forms, the F510 and the F511 signed, because they go hand in hand. It's amazing to me that agents aren't getting both forms signed, because it's clearly states at the top of the form that both forms must be signed. So that's just a compliance issue on my end that I want everybody to be aware of.
Good stuff, good stuff. One of the things that I'm also recognizing is we're moving extremely fast. And one of the things that Seth said in the class last week, lawsuits are up. Attorney letters are up. So the attorneys are winning in this market. We're losing on multiple offers. They're winning on writing attorney letters. And the number one reason they're writing these letters, you know, obviously emotion plays a lot of it, but I'm going to put it on all of us as realtors. We're not explaining the contract. We're not explaining agency. And in the state of Georgia, we are a disclosure state. Disclose, disclose, disclose. You are supposed to, when you start working with anyone, explain how they are hiring you as a customer or a client. And then the next step is you should be going over the contract. I realize you're trying to get those offers in as quickly as possible. When you have the consultation with that buyer or the listing presentation, that's the best time to talk about the contract, not just the listing, but hey, by the way, when we get an offer, here are some of the things that are going on out there. How would you like me to handle multiple offers? How would you like me to handle backup offers? We're not discussing it, we're just doing it. And then what happens as brokers, we get the complaint call that I don't think my agent has my best interest. I didn't realize by taking an offer over ask that it might not appraise, and so on and so forth. Now, you and I both know the buyers and sellers are not crazy. They know what they're doing because they're telling you to do it. But I think if we have the conversation and explain the contract at the beginning, everyone on this call has experienced something in this market, whether it's losing to multiple offers or not being able to find properties. All of that needs to be discussed. That's why we're consultants. We don't tell them what to do. We consult them how to do it. And then we let them decide what makes sense. And of course, if they do something that is illegal or fattening, then we let them know we can't do that. But it is our responsibility. And you can be liable in a lawsuit for not disclosing, for not explaining the contract. And if you don't understand it, that's what this call is for. That's what the broker is for. That's what the contract class is for. If you're in productivity, that's what that's for. So the first tool that you should really understand is your contract so that you can explain it. Has anyone run into that, or they have any questions about something that we can help you understand better? For instance, the backup, that process and how that should be done. Anything else on the table?
Yeah, Deborah, I think that's all really good information. I'll add to that also. Before you in your listing before you advertise it as perfect for Airbnb, you better check your regional laws and make sure that you can actually do an Airbnb. Okay, I live in historic College Park. And I see all the time agents that don't know, that don't live in the area, say, oh, perfect for Airbnb. And guess what? It's illegal in historic College Park to have an Airbnb. So just be careful, do your research. Like Deborah said, slow down. You need to explain the contract. You need to go over the brokerage agreement with the client in detail. These are very important things, and it just sets you apart from the competition, because you're going to come across as much more professional by doing that and knowing that you understand what you're explaining.
Yeah, that's great. That was recently on the news, and I also knew historic College Park. That just to piggyback on that, the reason why that's happening in some counties, for those of you that may not realize it, we do when we go on vacation, when we get that bill and we're checking out. Hotels charge, 16%, 17% taxes, and it's all a bunch of junk fees and things like that. Well, they're losing out on that money with Airbnb. So counties are saying, hey, we're not getting that money back into the cities and back into the counties because people are doing Airbnb and we don't get a piece of that.
Right.
So there are some counties that have it on the table to vote yay or nay for it. And College Park is one of them. Historic College Park is one of them. So that is exactly right. I have had a broker issue where the agent did not check, and I can't remember where this was, and the HOA got involved and all kinds of things happened to keep that buyer from purchasing the home, and attorneys were involved and so on and so forth. So before you give yourself that kind of heartburn, make sure you ask that question of the seller. Sometimes the seller doesn't know. You may have to dig a little deeper, ask some of your colleagues, are they aware of anything? To make sure that you are, that you have done your homework. And really the buyer should be doing the homework. That's what due diligence is all about, to check those things. If your buyer is telling you up front, I want to buy this because I want to make it an Airbnb, really, really, really make sure that that's the case, because it's like an HOA making a change at the last minute. They could be voting on that right now and you wouldn't know it.
And you'd be surprised how many investors call and say they want to buy investment property in that area because they want to do Airbnb. I mean, I probably get 5 or 6 calls a day from investors saying, oh, I want to get this property for Airbnb in College Park. They give me the zip code and I was like, no, 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 you can't do that.
Oh, the last thing you want to do is to sell property to someone thinking they're going to Airbnb it or use it for a flight attendant pilot crash pad, and then they're shut down.
And that's exactly what they want.
And there's a lawsuit ready
they say
to.
for the flight attendant. They say for the flight attendants and for the pilots. That's exactly what they say to me. I'm like, no, you can't do that. Yeah.
And if you do Airbnb and there's an association, make sure the buyer gets the bylaws and covenants. I just sold one that they are using it for an Airbnb, and we did all the research. Okay. And it was new construction, and we waited until it was part of the contract that we had to receive those covenants and bylaws. And in there, it said specifically the companies that the buyer had to use. Okay. So, your buyer may be thinking about doing it themselves, but the association said you must use the following companies if you're going to do Airbnb. So you don't ever want to tell someone, yeah, you could do that. That sounds like a great idea. Make some money, blah, blah, blah. And then they're going to come back to you upset that even though they were supposed to do their due diligence, they're going to be upset with you for not consulting them through it.
That is all such great advice. I'd love to throw one thing on the table about that. And I think, oftentimes, especially as productive as we are, I don't often like the word busy because productive is a better word. So okay. I think as productive as we are, adding one more thing to our plate sometimes feels overwhelming, yet the genius behind it is so smart. I had a client that wanted to buy an Airbnb. I did not have time to do all of the research. Thank gosh, I have a virtual assistant, and I gave her very strict marching orders and said, I need you to find this, 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 and this, and solve this, this, and this, and I need it in writing before we go out and make the offer. So I was blessed to have the opportunity. I do have a licensed virtual assistant because you have a lot of that. And then I went in and behind and checked. Simply, she was able to call the municipal office there in the county, and they directed her to their website that does allow for it. And so she copy pasted, and I just simply put it into command as one of my documents under other, so that I had it if there was a question and the date that I got it. So it's not that hard to do. Best $30 I ever spent. She charges me $15 an hour. I'd write that check 10 times over. So just be smart. So we are representing our clients. I didn't physically have the time to do it yet. Try to make sure you have a resource, maybe in a virtual assistant or someone else, maybe a newer agent that really wants to learn from you, that you can teach them and help raise them up and then follow behind them to make sure the information's correct.
Carlton, do you have anything?
No, but I was going to pitch our next class when we're done. Our next session. Does anybody have any questions for the brokers? Just things that you've been struggling with, or now's your opportunity.
Not at this time. Just when is this market gonna balance out? What's the prediction here?
For real.
Something's
It
gotta give.
will. It will. It always does. It will.
I certainly hope so.
I think one of the greatest gifts of being with a company like this is we are trained to work in any market. And I think
That's true.
coming on, I mean, there's a culling of the herd always. And so there are a lot of people that can get into the market because a rising tide carries all ships, but yet very few can stick and sustain themselves for a long period of time. So your brokers have been in the business for a very long time. And just like Tom said, what goes up must come down and level out. It will level itself back out. And so I love the conversation as I dove in just a couple minutes late about making sure that our clients, that we are explaining to them that, and I love that, I guess it was Janice, you shared that you don't want your client overpaying. So
No.
it's very challenging right now. I think there's an opportunity behind let emotions subside before you decide. And right now we don't have time to, process a lot of that. They have to pull the trigger quickly, but I also want them to know, and I know you guys feel the same, that I never want to put them in something that I can't help sell later. So
Right.
protecting them around that is very important. So no transactions worth the reputation. So,
Yeah.
but I love it.
We made it through that last 10 years. We'll make it through this one.
Every market's different, for sure. So,
Yeah, it did. I've never seen one like this in my 29.
neither.
It's like a 2020 continuation. We're in this alternative planet. Get me back to Earth, please.
I know, back to Earth, back to Earth. I feel like ET.
Well, this is helpful to know that this is new. I've only been in real estate for 2 years. And one year is the pandemic. The first year is, just learning systems. So
Welcome to real
it's-
estate.
right on. Okay.
So
If those of us that are archaic are still smiling, you're going to be just fine.
you'll be just fine, sweetie. Welcome to a world of real estate.
Well,
It's
you want
nice to it's nice to sit in with brokers and hear multiple broker perspectives. So thank you for setting this up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. You guys are awesome.
Thank you for being
I
here.
applaud you.
You want to go ahead and recap for next week, or not next week, 2 weeks from now?
Sure. Okay, so for the 24th, Kim and I are spearheading this one. It's the working title, I've not gone over this with Kim, is broker bailout. What do you think, Kim? Broker bailout? All right, anyway.
I can make that work. Let's make it work. Just tell me what we're doing and we'll put it all. Let's do it.
So basically it's, we're going to try to, we're working on getting some experienced agents that have had some of their issues throughout their career where they've needed broker guidance or they've been involved in potential lawsuits, things like that. So we can all learn from their experience. So that's what's going to be on the 24th from 12 to 1. I hope everybody here can attend. It should be good. It's always good to hear other agents' experiences and be able to learn and grow from what they've been through. So.
And I love that. And I think primarily because especially a lot of our agents really hitting it out of the park in this market and doing big numbers, they tend to expose themselves to a lot of different opportunities and obstacles, I guess you could say. And they learn a lot. So when you have an agent that is, I guess you could call it disruptive in the market, closing 10, 12, 15, 20 units a month, and they're disrupting the market. So a lot of people, they'll turn heads and oftentimes not in a great way. So we're called in on a lot of those, although they're experienced and they know almost everything. When we're called in, we just have to bring our perspective and just calm the forces a little bit and bail them out. Good Lord. Life preserver, something, I don't know, a line, a bucket scoop, pick them up, brush them off, put them back outside. It's fun. We're always learning. If you guys think we know it all, we do not. I learn every day.
Nope.
I shared 2 of the 5 I learned in the last week, and I've been doing this 22 years. So
Yeah,
We're
it's
excited to
an
take
ongoing thing in this industry because someone will sit across the table from you and say something and you're looking at them going, WTF? Yeah.
That's funny.
True.
Yeah, it's funny.
All right, well, we might finish a few minutes early unless there's someone on here that has a question that they are wanting to ask right now. We may finish about 10 minutes early today. I did go ahead and put a recap of some of the things that we talked about in the chat. And just to kind of remind you, we had a lot of different topics today, which was great. And that's really what today's format was all about. We'll have some formats where it's kind of open season like it was today. And then we'll have some that are a little more structured based on request or based on things that we're seeing in the industry. But again, this is held twice a month on a Monday from 12 to 1. If you do have any questions that you want us to cover before that happens, send those in to your broker and then we can make sure we address that. And we hope that you're enjoying this. This is not for us, it's really for you, although I'll take that back. It's for us too. We learn from each other. So please don't be shy about asking the questions. This is a safe place to fall to get those questions answered and to make you a better agent. We can't really worry about the ones that don't understand code of ethics and standard of practice. Their day will come when the market corrects and they'll go back to a job. But for now, and I'm kind of blunt, I don't have a problem saying that, but it's the reality. One of the things that Seth shared is we are at about 100,000 agents in Georgia, where about a year and a half, we were 40,000 agents. So that tells you that because the market is so good, how many agents have hit the street since 2019, and they're not all educated. They're not having a broker chat at 12. They're kind of cutting their teeth on, I have a pen, I have paper, or I have a tablet and I can write a contract. And some of them might beg, borrow, and steal in order to get the deal done. And that doesn't make it right. Stick to your guns of doing things professional, and you will be able to be like a lot of people on this call that are 20 and 30 and 40 years in the business. Well, maybe not. I don't know if it's 40. If I'm still here 40 years in the business, please take the lockbox out of my hand.
I know that's right. Take my car keys.
So anyway, but I really thank all of you. I thank my broker colleagues for being on here today, and for all of you taking an hour of your time to educate yourself. I'm really proud of the people that continue to be students of life, and of course students in this business, because it's changing as we speak. So good for you for staying fresh and on top of things. Your clients and your customers will appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any parting words?
No, but thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time. Thanks for
All right,
sharing.
we'll go ahead and sign off. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.